So welcome. Why don't you start by introducing yourself, your name, your title, and the organization that you represent today?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm Gil, G-I-L, Bashe, B-A-S-H-E. I'm Chair Global Health and Purpose at Finn Partners, F-I-N-N-P-A-R-T-N-E-R-S. And Finn Partners is a global integrated communications and counseling firm.
All right. Well, welcome, Gil. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for chatting with me today. Is this your first HITLAB Summit, or have you been
It
to
is
this
not.
before?
It is not my first, but because of COVID, it's my first in real life
Well,
HITLAB.
we are so happy that you're here and around all these great people. What's something that you're looking forward to being in person and being able to see all of these new innovators talk about their startups and everything in between?
Yeah, one of the great things about this community from what I saw virtually and now I see in real life is actually the transparency of people's voices. You know, often when people are at conferences and they're there to present or to network, they put on their game face. And that game face actually is a veneer where you don't really get a chance to hear the real story, the struggle, the desire, the challenges they're facing. After 3 days in a forum like this, hearing different people's ideas, seeing some of the walls they're bumping into, you get a real view of what our category is doing and what it needs to do in order to fulfill its ultimate mission, which is to improve people's lives.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like about being here in person is actually not just picking up the content, but through the content and the conversation, building community with people I can potentially help.
Wow. Well, Gil, that was absolutely beautifully put. So why don't you talk a little bit about your story, your experience in the healthcare industry, and how you are improving people's lives yourself, you and Finn Partners?
Well, so my desire to improve people's lives is a 40-year journey.
Wow. Start from the beginning.
It started, as we talked about just a few moments ago,
Sure.
that I was in an elite military unit responsible for the health and well-being of some 300 people in active situations. And when you're in that sort of setting, you see people dealing with everything from, well, athlete's foot to, unfortunately, very serious trauma wounds. And you realize that behind the clothing and the bravado is a human being who's broken. But the real game changer for me was rescuing wounded enemy soldiers under fire.
Wow.
I didn't speak their language. They didn't speak my language. But the language of healing is a universal language. And it was at that moment that I decided I would dedicate my life to helping people all around the world, regardless of race or religion or uniform or flag or economic situation. I realized the sanctity of life. And I saw innovation or information and innovation as pathways where I could contribute. I've spent years in government. I have built companies. I was CEO of a billion-dollar company. I'm an advisor to companies. I'm consulting with major companies that you know of, like Microsoft or companies of that nature. I'm privileged to be chair of Global Health and Purpose at Finn Partners, which is a purpose-driven global company. All of that has really informed my perspective. But also, having been in private equity for a few years, I did that. I saw how investments are made, on what criteria. And I sort of said to myself, you know, what happens if I brought all my inside out experience to the outside in world? And I contributed that to the conversation to help make the pace of innovation move faster in order to fulfill its mission. So that's the journey. I'm a writer. I'm editor-in-chief of a large medical platform called Medical Life. We have anywhere between, depending on our stories, between 30,000 and 1 million readers a month.
Wow.
So it's quite a platform. And I might add, this morning I published a story on HITLAB.
That's
because
wonderful.
I think it's just a great conference and people should come here.
Well,
in the
I'm
fall and
biased,
every year.
but I completely agree.
Go visit the store in Medical Life, Medica with a K.
Absolutely, and I will. So going back to your absolutely incredible journey and going back all the way to the beginning, can you talk a little bit about how your experience in the military and in combat helping people with health and care in the field, how you've been able to use those skills and apply them to your work today with Finn Partners and elsewhere?
Well, one of the things you see is collaboration. And we're not lacking innovation, we are lacking collaboration. And so you see how people in really difficult situations unite and bond together to get something done. You see how different services come together to support each other. Now, the beginning of integration to some extent, you see on the field before your very eyes. You see how people can be pushed. You can see how that people can be really asked to help. But most importantly, I think you see the vulnerability of people, and you realize suddenly that we're organic.
Yeah.
We think we'll be around forever. And then suddenly you see again and again, tragically, we're not. And I think that impression that was implanted in me made me recognize at that moment how precious life is, and that we really need to deploy the very best of ourselves, individually and collectively, to make a difference in the world. And that's a privilege. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
So from that experience, which is filled with frightening moments, no doubt about it, no doubt about it. And understanding as a healer in that awful setting, I could make a difference. I will say what I find most interesting, some of the toughest fighters when they're injured, some of the things they ask really are in my mind constantly. They ask me, am I going to die? Will you speak to my mother? Very human expressions of life. It is not the sort of the bravado, it is the vulnerability. And I think when people are ill, whether it's a rare disease or a chronic disease or something intermittent that will pass very quickly, people at the time where it presents, whether it's a bad rash or worse, they feel very vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we have to deploy as much of ourselves to support them with clear, authentic information that will help them make informed decisions to participate in their care. Digital health has a huge role to play in that purpose.
I absolutely could not agree more. And going back to a previous point you made, which I think is a fantastic one, that the gap isn't necessarily in the technological advancement, but in the community building. How do you think digital health can be used as a tool to kind of fill those gaps in community? And do you think that technology itself can be used in order to apply it there? Or are they two completely separate things, do you think?
They're united.
Okay.
They're united. When we think of building bridges, information is part of the bridge building process. So when we take a look at your health information, that maybe you visited a doctor over here and now you're visiting a doctor over here, the ability to actually draw from your experience, your narrative of what's going on, and look at the experience elsewhere allows us to make better informed decisions. What happens is, right now we're frightened of information also. Information we feel could be used against us to deny care, or perhaps to sort of make us look like perhaps we're actually trying to game the system in some way. We're trying to get the system to be more supportive of us. We have to actually always remember our humanity, both on the provider side, both on the patient side, on the payer side, on the policy side, and on the product innovation side. Information really has to be used for good. And we have to put aside, how do I use information against you as a consumer, as a person, as a patient? That's the challenge of information. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely.
But digital health is, no doubt about it, it's the wiring of information,
It is.
how information is accessed and conveyed.
So how do you think that digital health and all of this data that we're collecting needs to be used appropriately and effectively in order to make sure that we maintain that humanity in healthcare and don't just dilute patients into data points and statistics?
Yeah, well, culture crushes innovation all the time, right? Culture is created by you and me.
Yeah.
And a quick story, when my physician father-in-law was leaving this world for the next, his last 13 days, 12 of which were spent in a hospital, I said to his nurse, who was changing every day on the floor of this academic medical center, if you read the electronic medical record, you'll find that there. And her response is essential to your question. I don't have time to read the electronic medical record.
Wow.
So what we're looking at is we're inventing at a faster pace than we can absorb or access or utilize the platform. So that's why I said it's not about innovation, it's about communication and collaboration. So I think we have to take into mind the human experience around digital health and information. That's the key right now. If we can do that much more effectively, then we're going to make a difference. An example of digital health is and this question you just raised, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Try to imagine you can say at the beginning of your shift, provide me with information on patient X, Y, and Z in a summary of 200 words, what I need to know. And get that basic information. And then if you have questions, you're curious, you can access the record at that point. But ChatGPT will get to a place where we'll be able to use the volumes of 30 years of medical data in your electronic medical record and bring it down to a 200-word synopsis that we can get a glimmer of your physiological life in order to make better decisions. That's where it's all going to have to come together.
Well, Gil, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much about digital health, myself, my life's purpose, and everything in between. So thank you so much for chatting
Focus
with me
on your life's purpose.
and answering all my questions.
Often what we forget is these lives are organic and time-bound.
Right.
And you will get to a place, obviously another 100 years from now, but you will get to a place where you'll say, did I make a difference during this time where I was a visitor on this planet? You don't want to look back and feel regret about that. You want to feel each day you're doing something to help humanity, and you are by supporting HITLAB.
Well, and you are here by supporting HITLAB as well, chatting with me and changing the world in 100 other ways. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.